Good evening,
Hello, everyone.
everyone. This is,
And I'm sorry, sir. I,
go right ahead.
hello, everyone, and welcome to Congressman Jared Huffman's telephone town hall for California's 2nd Congressional District. We're so glad you've joined us this evening to discuss issues that matter most to you as constituents of the district. If you'd like to ask a question this evening, please press star 3 now or any time during this evening's call. And if you'd like to stay up to date with Congressman Huffman's work, we welcome you and encourage you to press star 6 to subscribe to the Congressman's e-newsletter. We're excited to hear directly from you tonight, and we'll get started in just a few minutes while we wait for everyone to join the call. In the meantime, please let me go over a few details about this evening's interactive town hall. If you'd like to ask the Congressman a question, please press star 3 on your telephone keypad now or at any time during the call. Again, that's star 3 to ask a question. And if you'd like to sign up for the Congressman's e-newsletter to stay informed about his work, please press star 6. If you're listening online, you can also submit your questions in the chat. You can also follow along on Facebook or watch the Congressman live by visiting https://huffman.house.gov/live. And I'll repeat that. That's https://huffman.house.gov/live. Now, without further delay, I'd like to turn the call over to Congressman Huffman for his opening remarks. Congressman, you are live and the floor is yours, sir. Please take it away.
Thank you and good evening, everyone. I was so excited to get started with this telephone town hall that I interrupted our moderator there at the beginning, but it's good to be underway with all of you. Welcome. And I'm going to keep my opening remarks very brief. I want to do that because we've only got an hour and I want to get to as many of your questions as possible. But the bottom line is this. I'm trying to do a lot of town halls and public events right now, as many as possible, because I know that people are worried and alarmed about many of the developments that we've seen in the first month of the second Trump presidency. And I want everyone to know something. I am fully engaged. This is not business as usual. I consider many of these events to be dire threats to our democracy and the rule of law and to core American values. And we'll have a chance to talk more about these issues.
Folks, if you would like to ask a question, please press star 3 on your telephone keypad. And if you'd like to sign up for Congressman Huffman's e-newsletter, please press star 6. Yes, sir. You're live. Please go ahead.
Hey, folks, I don't know what that glitch was, but I was just running through the list of executive orders to set the stage a little for our conversation. One of the ones that disturbed me so much was the firing of the 18 independent watchdogs, inspectors general that we count on to root out real waste, fraud, and abuse through the federal government. We have seen, bizarre promises and public statements involving landing on Mars and annexing Greenland and Canada. That can be distracting, but we've also seen things that are truly dangerous and are already causing damage in people's lives, including the illegal freezing of federal funding for vital programs and agencies across much of the government. We know that an unelected billionaire, someone who's not even a valid public official, let alone someone who has cleared security clearances, has been given the keys to government. Elon Musk and his private sector tech bros are doing things that no outside private party should be able to do, including having full access to a lot of our really sensitive personal data, taxpayer data, and more. Thoughtless and cruel mass layoffs at federal agencies are rolling out. I think a lot of that is illegal. It's being challenged in the court, but it's enormously disruptive. And we're seeing in fire country, which I represent a lot of projects that we need that keep us safer are grinding to a halt. We could lose an entire season of fire safety projects because of these political games. And we also know that there are huge changes to foreign policy that are being announced seemingly every day that causes me great concern, including the abandonment of our ally Ukraine, the apparent cozying up of Donald Trump to Vladimir Putin and other dictators, and just this week, the firing of generals, what appears to be a political purge in the military that should be very disturbing to all of us. So that's just really the tip of the iceberg. In the face of all of that, we're going to run out of government funding on March 14th, just a few weeks from now. And so we are careening towards a possible Republican shutdown of the government. That's an important consideration. And then the fact that we just finished the most expensive natural disaster in U.S. history, the Southern California fires. We're going to need federal government help, probably one of the bigger disaster relief packages in American history. And that is hanging in the balance as well. This week, there will be a new budget plan announced by congressional Republicans. They say that we're going to be voting on it in the next couple of days. And we should all be on high alert for cuts in all sorts of critical programs, especially Medicaid. And I want you to know that Medicaid, is not just for older people. It's not just for nursing home care, although it's critical for that. But there are tens of thousands of Medicaid recipients all over my district and in every congressional district in America. Often we're talking about people who are disabled, either with severe physical disabilities or developmental disabilities, and of course, folks that are, very vulnerable at the low end of the socioeconomic scale, for whom it is their only health insurance. So cuts to that program would be devastating and would have impacts that are very widespread in our community. We'll keep a close eye on that. And in the face of all of this, tomorrow I will be participating in a Republican hearing at the Natural Resources Committee on, you'll never believe this, space mining. Not even something real right now, but something Elon Musk thinks is cool, thinks he can make some money on. And so my Republican colleagues are going to have a hearing on it. That is where we are, folks. And we will now turn to your questions. I'll just close this opening part by saying that I have worried for years that our country is sleepwalking into authoritarianism. The past few weeks, it feels like we are speed walking. There is a lot to be concerned about, but I want you to know I am working on this 24/7. We are not going to give up. We are not going to give in. And I think together we will find a way through. With that, let's turn to your questions. I look forward to a discussion.
Thank you, Congressman. Our first question is, we're going to start with an online question. We've got, Congressman, if you're ready, we've got, how can we protect our private information as the Musk pillage government agencies?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I know everybody's worried about it. So look, there's three ways that we can stop Elon Musk from doing more damage to our private data or leaking it or monetizing it or anything else. The first is the courts, and there are lawsuits right now pending that I think should be quite effective in stopping Musk. In fact, he has already been ordered by one court to give the data back and to stop having access to some of it. It'll go on appeal. It may take a while, but those legal challenges are incredibly important. Here in Congress, of course, Democrats are in the minority, but we've nonetheless introduced legislation to get Elon Musk out of these federal agencies, out of our taxpayer data. That legislation will need some Republican votes in order to pass. We will work on trying to get those votes, but even if we can't, we will use that to try to hold our Republican colleagues accountable, because they should be just as mad as we are about this. And then the third way that we can do something about this is a very powerful one, and all of you are part of it. It's public opinion. It is by speaking up and showing up, and whether it's protests or joining groups that are engaged in advocacy, collectively our voices can and should make a difference on this too. Thanks for the question.
Thank you, Congressman. Our next question comes from Wanda of Arcadia. And the question is, the Trump administration is cutting staff at national parks. What are you planning to do to keep these sacred places acceptable or accessible to every citizen?
Yeah, thanks, Wanda, from Arcata, not Arcadia, but it's a common mistake. So look, we're going to be exploring this in all the hearings that we have at the Natural Resources Committee. So tomorrow, while Republicans try to have a hearing on space mining, we're going to use that time to tell the American people, at least the ones who are watching on C-SPAN, what's going on in our national parks. Because in the parks I represent, I'm hearing about layoffs that are going to have devastating effects. This summer, when tourism is peaking in our national parks, we're going to have a hard time keeping the restrooms open and the trash cans from overflowing. We'll probably have public safety personnel like rangers cleaning out trash cans. We'll have biologists trying to keep the restrooms sanitary. It's not a sustainable situation. And, we'll be lucky if we're even able to keep many of these park units open through peak tourist season the way we're going. So I just think shining a bright light on that, the public will not like this and hopefully will not stand for it. And as we all push back together, hopefully we'll get it turned around.
Thank you so much, Congressman. Your next question comes from Ward of Mill Valley. Ward, you are live on the call with the Congressman. Please go ahead and ask your question, Ward.
Oh, geez. I didn't expect this. I'm very worried about the disruption that Musk and Trump has ordered Musk to create in the normal processing of things in the government, and specifically regarding the Internal Revenue Service, which they seem to be hell-bent on decimating. So how safe will it be to file our taxes? What is the risk that the money that we pay in our paying our taxes will go down some rabbit hole, or will be lost, or will be siloed? And what risk do we have in not paying our taxes if we wish to protest? That's my question.
Thanks for your question. So, look, I'm not recommending that anyone withhold taxes or not pay their taxes. I think that probably would be a mistake. And there's no way. I hear often that, well, California is a donor state. We pay more taxes than we get back from the federal government. Why can't we stop doing that? Well, the way we collect federal taxes doesn't go through the state. It just goes straight from the taxpayer to the U.S. Treasury. So there really aren't any ways to withhold or even, hold in abeyance the taxes that we owe as Californians. But we are going to do everything we can to make sure that your tax dollars are not misappropriated, obviously, and to make sure that your tax data is protected. That is critically important. The one thing I will say about your question involving, tax season is I'm worried about the timeliness of tax refunds, because they're laying people off at the IRS. And, while claiming to be champions for taxpayers, there's going to be a rude awakening for a lot of American taxpayers when they find that the people who turn these tax returns around and get their refunds out the door are shorthanded and can't do it nearly as quickly. It'll just be one of many of these impacts, because these guys really don't know what they're doing.
Thank you, Congressman. I'd like to remind our listeners, if you have a question, please press *3 on your telephone keypad now or at any time during the call. Congressman, your next question comes from Scott. Scott, you are live on the call with the Congressman. Please go ahead and ask your question, Scott.
Hey, Scott. I don't think I have Scott.
Hello, Congressman?
There you are.
Yes, thank you. I'm just really, I have a lot of neighbors concerned from what's occurring. And we just seem very distraught that there's nothing that can be done to stop this insanity. And, in regards to the IRS, the reduction in forces in the Forest Service and their firefighting capabilities. We're up here in the Mendocino National Forest area. And it just doesn't seem like there's anything to slow this juggernaut of insanity down. We're just getting, I have a neighbor who's just ultimately really depressed. He actually said it the other day, and I'm really concerned with him about his health. Is there anything that can stop this from proceeding at the rate that they're doing? It doesn't seem like there's anything that the Democrats can actually stop this, it seems like to me.
Yeah. Thanks for your question, Scott. And look, I'm concerned too. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. I'm not going to try to gloss over with happy talk what's actually going on. There is reason for dire concern about our democracy, about these federal services and programs that we count on for our safety, for our environment, for so many things, for our health care. But we're not powerless. And I want to emphasize that. So giving up is not an option. We're not going to just roll over and allow all of these destructive things to take place. Here in Congress, I have a smaller toolbox than I wish I did. I'm in the minority. But come March 14th, Democratic votes are going to be needed by Republicans in order to fund the government. So we will leverage those moments of power that we do have. Remember, the House of Representatives is very closely divided. Republicans have a 3-seat majority. They are going to need lots of Democratic votes at several points over the coming months. And we will use those points of leverage to try to push back in meaningful ways on all of this. So we're going to do what we can. We're also going to use our public platforms to speak out. I'm trying to do that all the time. It's one of the reasons I'm having these town halls, to raise engagement, to raise awareness. And all of you out there are starting to get engaged. I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it in the public opinion polling. I'm seeing it in my town hall attendance. We're starting to see it in protests and activism. Certainly congressional offices' phones are ringing off the hook. All of that matters. All of that matters. The media, the free press, part of our democracy, is starting to tune in and make a difference on all of this too. And I mentioned the courts. It's a big one. All of that litigation has the potential to rein this in, because so much of what Trump and Musk are doing is illegal. They're just violating the law. And between courts and Congress and public opinion, I do think we can push back and stop them on a lot of this, but it may take a little bit of time, and everybody's just got to hang in there. You got to tell your neighbor to hang in there. You are in this together with a lot of people, including your congressman, and we just got to stay strong.
Thank you, Congressman. Your next question comes from Mary, and Mary says, I'm an Air Force veteran, and I'm concerned about my health care. I'm scheduled for an operation, and I'm worried about cuts to veterans' benefits. What if they aren't able to perform the operation for me and other vets am I to do?
Yeah. I hope you will keep in close touch with my office, Mary, because, veteran healthcare and VA services is one of the things that, many of my Republican colleagues say they care about, and has great political saliency on both parties. So when I hear about vets that are having a hard time getting transportation to Fort Miley or to the VA clinic, or any other problems that you're having with VA care, I want to know about it so that I can make it known. I mean, your stories are super powerful, and we will do everything we can to push back and make sure that you're protected. But we know about it. I'm concerned about it too. And we're going to do everything we can to protect you, Mary.
Thank you so much, Congressman. Your next question comes from Carolyn of Forest Knolls, and Carolyn says, "Can we send our federal tax dollars directly to Ukraine? Can we try to do this?"
I would not recommend that, Carolyn. I applaud the sentiment. Believe me, I'm mortified at the idea of the United States abandoning Ukraine and siding with Russia in this conflict. I'm so heartened the way Europe is responding to this dismal lack of leadership, the opposite of leadership by Donald Trump. And I just can't wait to get the United States back, with the rest of the civilized world with a good foreign policy. But in the meantime, no, I don't think any kind of redirecting your tax dollars is a good idea. We got to find other ways to push back.
Thank you, Congressman. Your next question comes from Dwayne, and Dwayne asks, "Can you please be more of a voice on independent social media? Do interviews with independents and content creators who have large followings but aren't mainstream media?"
Yeah, I hear a lot of that, Dwayne. And believe me, I know that it's hard to teach an old dog a new trick. And some of these platforms and content providers are new, like within the last few years. So I'm starting to find out more about them. I'm going on podcasts and alternative radio stations and all kinds of shows that I didn't even know about a few years ago. And I think you'll see more of me, but I also know that we've got a lot of great messengers out there. So even if it's not me, I think you're going to hear from a lot of my congressional Democratic colleagues as we try to cover those bases, because you're right, people are losing confidence in mainstream media. They are looking for other validators of information, other sources of information. And I think many of my Democratic colleagues and I have been a little slow to evolve to that transformation. We're going to try to catch up here.
Thank you, Congressman. For our listeners, or maybe you're just joining the call, if you would like to ask a question, please press *3 on your telephone keypad now. And if you're enjoying this update and you want to subscribe to important information, I encourage you to press *6 to subscribe to the Congressman's e-newsletter. Congressman, your next question comes from John, and John asks, what the Congressman seeing coming after the expiration of continuing resolution?
Yeah. Good question, John. So March 14th is the date. So look, I think it's important to remember that Republicans have control of all branches of government right now. They have the White House, they have the House of Representatives, they have the Senate. So passing a government funding bill to keep the government from shutting down is their primary responsibility. And if they want Democratic votes to help them, they cannot jam us with all of this craziness that's going on with Elon Musk. They can't ask huge policy concessions or anything else. They've got to be part of a reasonable compromise. And so I think you're going to see Democrats stand our ground. We hate government shutdowns, of course. We believe in government. We want it to run better, but we think government is essential and we need it, and we certainly need to keep it open. But we're going to be real judicious about what we do with our votes. I can't telegraph that any more specifically right now, because one thing I have learned is that the negotiations over what goes into a deal like this don't involve 215 Democrats in the House of Representatives. They involve one Democrat. In our case, it's our Democratic leader, Hakeem Jeffries. And so rather than kind of freelance in ways that I think might undermine his power at the negotiating table, I will communicate my views to him privately and try to stand as united as possible to give him all the strength in the world going into that negotiation. But I've got a lot of faith in his ability to push back and do the right thing. But stay tuned. March 14th is a big, big date.
Thank you, Congressman. Your next question comes from Robin of San Rafael. Robin asks, I want to know if there is really an option to cut Social Security.
Not in my book. In no way should we allow any cuts to Social Security because it is not an entitlement. It is an earned benefit. It's like an insurance benefit where you have been paying the premiums your entire working life. This is not a handout. It's something that you earned during your working years. And our job, my job as a congressman, is to make sure that it's there for you because you plan your retirement around it. So that said, I think my Republican colleagues and certainly Donald Trump understand that Social Security is incredibly popular. In the past, Republicans have made lots of attempts to cut it, and each time it's been a political nightmare for them. They've paid a heavy price. So I think they're going to be very wary about going right to cuts in Social Security. But here are the dots that you need to connect. When you say that you got to look at the federal budget and save $4.5 trillion so that you can give tax cuts to billionaires, there's only a few places you can go in the federal budget to find that kind of money. And that's why I talked a lot earlier about Medicaid. That's one of the places where the big money is. The other place is the defense budget, and they're not going to cut that seriously. I'll be very surprised if they propose serious defense cuts. And so, you're still looking for trillions of dollars. It is inevitable that they will find their way back to Medicare and Social Security. And some of my Republican colleagues in Congress are saying that out loud. They've always said it out loud. Others, I think, are being a little more coy about it. But when you look at the numbers, when you look at their passionate focus on this $4.5 trillion tax cut that Donald Trump wants, there's no way to get there without touching Social Security and Medicare. So we are going to need to be on high alert.
Thank you, Congressman. Your next question comes from Felicia of San Rafael, and Felicia asks, how can we inform the people that are sticking with Republicans on what they are voting for? How can we inform them?
I think person-to-person information sharing is powerful. Especially, we were talking a little while ago about how people are losing faith in mainstream media. Sharing really good independent news sources, trustworthy news sources, is super important. And I think just maintaining good relationships with people, even if they have different politics than you. We can't just separate totally into political tribes and stop talking to each other. There's just been too much of that in this country. So I urge everyone, whether it's your family member who disagrees with you politically or your neighbor or whatever, try to keep those relationships healthy. Try to keep communicating because there is still an awful lot that could bring us together as fellow Americans and neighbors. And we've got to kind of hang on to that foundation as an important way to get through this.
Thank you, Congressman. Next question comes from Dwayne. Dwayne says, can you please be more of a voice on independent social media? Do interviews,
Yeah, I think I did that one.
Do interviews with
I'm
independent
still going to do more.
creators. Yeah. Yes.
Yes, I promise.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Next question comes from Beverly. The lawsuits in the federal court, when they get to the Supreme Court, do they have any chance? What will happen to them?
Yeah, I think each case is going to be different, Beverly. So, look, one of the first cases to make it to the Supreme Court may well be this 14th Amendment birthright citizenship one. And I would be thrilled if that's the first case they take up because legally, and I'm a lawyer, it's just a no-brainer. Donald Trump cannot rewrite the 14th Amendment and just wipe away birthright citizenship with an executive order. He doesn't have the ability to do that under our Constitution. And I would think that even this Supreme Court, which obviously is very friendly to Donald Trump, would rule against it in that case. So I think we will get some wins even with this Supreme Court. What I don't know is, which gifts they will give him on some of these other cases, the purging of the federal workforce or any number of other, the impoundment issue, which if you're following that, this is the president basically refusing to spend money that has been enacted by Congress because he doesn't like those laws. He doesn't like the programs. Now that's illegal. under our Constitution. We've even got a statute called the Impoundment Control Act of 1974 that says that definitely is illegal. You can't do that. But he appears willing to do it anyway. And what we don't know is, will he defy a court order, or will he simply challenge impoundment and then live with an adverse court decision? We're going to find out a lot of interesting things in the weeks and months ahead, and some of it could present a constitutional crisis. So again, I don't want to be too alarmist, but we've never seen anything like this. When we talk about ignoring court orders, there's no president in American history that's ever done that with a final court order. There's sort of urban myths about Andrew Jackson doing that with the Trail of Tears, but he didn't. That was a Supreme Court order against the state of Florida, not against the federal government. And so if Donald Trump is truly going to do this and ignore court orders, there is no precedent for that. And I think there would be an enormous public backlash and political price to pay. I hope it doesn't come to that. But if it does, we will be part of that backlash. I will be part of that backlash, and I'll be joining you at protests and doing everything I possibly can to push back.
Thank you, Congressman. And again, I want to remind our listeners, please, if you have a question, please press *3 on your telephone keypad. And if you would like to subscribe to the Congressman's e-newsletter, press *6. Congressman, next question from Rachel. Rachel says, are we willing to consider a government shutdown to allow the Republicans to see how serious this is? What are citizens supposed to do to help?
Yeah. So, Rachel, Republicans are already shutting down the government. That's just the reality of what's going on. You know, day after day, week after week, thousands and thousands and thousands of employees being laid off, sometimes illegally, in ways that the courts are starting to intervene and try to stop. But in many cases, those employees can't just be brought back, because in the case of USAID, the agency's been shut down. The building has been locked up in some cases. They've been shut out of their computer systems. So I consider this the beginning of a functional government shutdown by Donald Trump and Elon Musk and Republicans. Whether they will go that next step on March 14th and shut the government down, I hope not, but we will see. And I think the question is, will Democrats, ride to their rescue and fix their government shutdown for them? I don't think so this time around. Not while Elon Musk is shredding our Constitution, not while Donald Trump is shredding the rule of law. We are going to need major changes and reforms and assurances in order to provide our votes. But make no mistake, if there's a government shutdown, and there very well may be, that's the Republicans and Donald Trump doing it. It's not Democrats.
Thank you, sir. Next question comes from Georgiana of Novato. And Georgiana asks, what steps will you take to protect Medicare and Social Security from cuts? Both my husband and myself are on Social Security and are frightened Trump will try to take our benefits that we so rely on so many ways.
Yep. Look, I am just going to do everything I can to not let that happen. And I promise you that. There is just no way that I would ever support anything that reduced our earned benefits under either of these two programs. It's a sacred trust. So just know that is my ironclad commitment. I think we can and will prevail, but I also think that there's a very good chance they're going to try to cut one or both of these programs in the months ahead. And so all of us are going to need to be engaged. People are going to need to be ready to hit the phones, to hit the emails, to hit the streets if necessary, because we cannot stand by while we cut the retirement security lifeline for most of America to feather the nest of billionaires with a $4.5 trillion tax cut.
Thank you, sir. Next question comes from Craig of Fairfax. Craig asks, what is your vision if people actually organized and had an effect? What would that look like?
Yeah, I think it would look a lot. Thanks for the question, Craig. It would look a lot like 2017, to be honest. We faced some dark odds, some long odds in 2017. Similarly, Donald Trump and Republicans had full control of government. And their number one thing is they were going to repeal the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. And it was exactly that public awakening and activism that prevented them from doing it. I am convinced. I watched it happen, and I see it beginning to happen again now. So public opinion is an incredibly powerful part of our democracy, even now. And I think the only question is, can we mobilize it in time? Because they're going to move quickly on all of these things. That's why I am doing my part to, light my hair on fire in every way I can to get people engaged and awakened and fired up, because that's probably what it's going to take to push back against this.
Thank you, sir. And respectfully, Julie asks, how do we protect the 2028 election?
Yeah. We got to get to 2026 first. 2026 is the midterm election that, if historical patterns prevail, should mean the party out of power does very well. And that could give us a check and balance on all of this abusive action by Donald Trump and his overreach. It's exactly what happened in the 2018 midterm election. But we got to be careful about protecting free and fair elections right now. And, there's no doubt that Trump and his allies do not want to give up power. And they don't like rules. They don't like laws. They don't like norms. And so we're already seeing in the case, for example, of California, where, Governor Newsom has submitted a bill for $40 billion in federal disaster relief with the Los Angeles fires. Many people close to Donald Trump are suggesting that should be conditioned on California getting rid of some of its election laws and requiring voter IDs and doing other things that will discourage certain people from voting. Put a thumb on the scale for Trump and his allies. We cannot allow that to happen in California or anywhere else. So that is the kind of thing. There'll probably be other ways that this presents itself. But between now and 2026, I am absolutely sure that Trump and his Republican friends in Congress are going to try to make it harder for people to vote so that we will not have that chance to win back the House in the 2026 midterms. We're going to have to be super vigilant about that, and we're going to have to fight it with everything we've got.
Thank you, sir. I want to remind our listeners, please, if you have a question for the Congressman, please press *3 on your telephone keypad right now. And if you would like to subscribe to the Congressman's e-newsletter, please press *6. Congressman, next question comes from Jill. Jill says, many rural community nonprofits, that's clinics, public radio, that is, hold on, she just popped up. Sorry, questions are flying in furiously here. Jill says, oh my gosh, I lost Jill in the chat. My apologies.
I was asking about public radio and rural nonprofits.
Yes,
so I can just take up from there. Look, public radio, at least the budget line item for the National Corporation for Public Broadcasting is in real trouble. It is going to be targeted. They hate public broadcasting. The good news there is you've got listener and viewer support, and we can, for a short time, probably backfill and keep the lights on. But I'm worried about the federal funding, and I'm not sure that my Democratic colleagues and I will be able to protect it the way I would like until we can, win some elections and change the politics. But in terms of the nonprofits, same thing. There's an incredible purge underway of grants. You're seeing just an aimless slashing of programs without any regard for the way they're implemented in many cases through nonprofit and private actors all over the United States doing critical work, whether it's Meals on Wheels or food banks or serving veterans or any number of other mission critical things, making sure that we're safe heading into the fire season. So many different ways in which we're going to see damage from these haphazard cuts and these freezings of programs. So bring specific examples to my attention, to my office. We are collecting these stories. We are going to use them to push back in our own advocacy. So if you know of those in the rural North Coast, please reach out to us and share the details with it.
Thank you, Congressman. Next question comes from Eugene, and Eugene says, if the Department of Education is closed down, what happens to the administration of student loans? I have kids who rely on direct student loans for graduate school.
Yeah, it's not a good scenario, Gene. Look, what does the federal government do in education? Well, public education is primarily done by the states, absolutely. But the federal government has a few very important functions. Student loans is one of them. Another one is school transportation, school nutrition, and then the big one, special education. The IDEA, or Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act. Special education is a huge part of the school budgets everywhere in America, and the federal government has yet to live up to its 40% funding commitment from the 1970s. We're way short of it. So if you talk about now shutting down the Department of Education, even if you take some pieces of it and try to redirect them over to the Department of Commerce or somewhere else, there's going to be enormous disruption, enormous delay, probably a loss of funding at the end of the day, and incredible setbacks. All of these things hit people that are the most vulnerable, that are not the billionaires' kids, people who need student loans, people who need to ride the bus to school, people who need aides and special ed teachers and others just to get their education. So it's incredibly cruel and short-sighted. This idea of just eliminating the Department of Education is one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. That's why even the woman that Donald Trump made our Secretary of Education from the pro wrestling business, even she is saying that would need to go through Congress, and I don't think Congress is going to let them do it. So stay tuned.
Thank you, Congressman. Jill says many rural community nonprofits, clinics, public radio, food banks are going to lose federal dollars. What should they do to prepare, and how can Congress help?
Yeah, well, Democrats in Congress are keenly aware of that, and that's why we are raising hell about this funding freeze that is making it so that clinics are having to lay off healthcare providers. They can't hire doctors and other providers. This is happening in Indian country with Indian health services. It's happening with other qualified rural federal clinics. It's happening throughout healthcare. And people are going to be hurt. People are going to die because of these disruptions. That is not an overstatement. That is not alarmism. It's starting to happen right now. So look, what you can do is be in touch with my office. Make sure that we know the details, although I'm hearing a lot of it already. And we will just do our very best to make sure that our colleagues in Congress know. A lot of my Republican colleagues represent rural communities that are going to get hammered by these wrong-headed actions. So our ability to tell these stories and hold them accountable could be very, very critical to getting some of this turned around.
Thank you, sir. Your next question comes from Gail. Gail says, I'm with the American Postal Workers Union, and I want to ask on behalf of our local unions. She says, I want to ask on behalf of our local unions, it covers Marin, Sonoma, Mendocino, and Lake County. My gosh, sorry.
I can take it from there. I know the question.
Yes, thank you.
So look,
thank you, sir. Thank you.
All of our letter carriers, everybody involved in the Postal Service is worried right now because you've got ideologues that are talking about privatizing the Postal Service. Postal Service was the first government agency created in the United States of America. It's in the Constitution. It's one of the things that our 13 colonies decided we need a federal government because there's some things that we can only do together as a nation, and the Postal Service was like right up front. But these days, it's just remarkable how short-sighted things are. Anything you can make a buck on, they want to spin out, whether it's the National Weather Service or the Postal Service or a bunch of our public lands. And so that's exactly what they are proposing to do with the Postal Service, to fire the Postal Governing Board and to try to bring this directly under Donald Trump's authority. This is going to be hard for them to do because Congress passed a statute that creates autonomy for the Postal Service. So they will need to change the law to do this. And it will not be easy. We will push back. I will oppose it because I think it's a terrible idea. But they're going to try. I'm absolutely certain they're going to try. And it's just an awful, awful idea. So I can't sugarcoat it. I know I'm talking to some postal workers here. So many of our postal workers are veterans. It's always been a place where veterans find work after their military service, and that's something that we're proud of. It's part of the success story of the United States Postal Service. But right now, Postal Service is a political pawn for this privatization and monetization agenda, and I'm going to oppose it with everything I got.
Thank you, Congressman. Louisa asks, what can we do about the FDA not inspecting drugs made in the USA and elsewhere?
So I don't know about the drug inspection specifically, but I will say that the FDA has always been an independent agency with a little bit of arm's length from the President of the United States. And that's one of the things that, under Project 2025 and Donald Trump, they want to do away with. They hate any independence in any agency. That we were just talking about the Postal Service. They don't like that. They want Donald Trump to be able to pick up his phone and call any employee in any agency and say, you're fired, or more importantly, to intimidate them and bully them into doing whatever he wants. And with FDA, that's a scary thing, because the safety of the drugs we count on is critically important, but it also leads us into the abortion issue, because most of the abortions in America are medical abortions. They're done with pills, and the FDA approves the safety of those pills. We know that Donald Trump opposes abortion. We know he boasts about having ended Roe versus Wade, and he sent mixed messages about what he would do with respect to a nationwide abortion ban. But he's got a lot of folks surrounding him that want a nationwide abortion ban. And the easiest way to do that is to bring the FDA directly under his authority and to tell them to reverse or revoke the approval of mifepristone and any other drugs that terminate pregnancies. That functionally gets you to a national abortion ban.
Thank you, Congressman. Our next question comes from Carolyn of Little River, and Carolyn says, I'm worried about the reinstatement of the Older Americans Act. In Little River, we have almost lost Meals on Wheels for seniors. I'm a Gold Star mother, and I want my grandkids to keep their VA benefits. How will you keep these most important programs intact, sir?
Yeah. Thank you. I'm going to fight for those programs. And I think one of the best things I can do is carry your stories back to Washington. So if you would reach out to my office and tell us about the way your family counts on these programs, your community. Those are powerful personal stories. They put a human face on what Elon Musk and his tech bros just think are line items in a budget. They think everything is just a waste. Everything is waste, fraud, and abuse. They have no concept of vulnerable shut-ins that count on Meals on Wheels and other programs to keep them alive. So we're going to have our work cut out for us. We're going to have to humanize these budget line items and tell these stories in powerful ways. And I hope you will help us do that.
Thank you, Congressman. Your next question comes from Gary of Novato. And Gary says, how do we get back on the midterms? What do we do? What do we need to do? How do we volunteer? Is there anything we can do as citizens?
Thanks, Gary. So I can't talk about the partisan politics of this. I can talk about issues. I can talk about, politics in the public sense of my office. But, I hope you will be politically engaged. There's just a million ways to do that. So sometime when I'm not on the public clock, I can talk to you about partisan politics and some of the things that I hope you're aware of. But right now, I just want to urge you to, be part of groups, join with your neighbors, be as active as you can. Don't be alone. That's probably the most important thing I can tell people that are so worried in this moment. Don't sit alone with your, Twitter feed, doom scrolling. Be in community with people. Go find a group to be part of or something to volunteer with. And that's probably going to lead you into some types of political engagement that'll be really productive and impactful. It'll also help us all keep our sanity.
Thank you, Congressman. Your next question comes from Norman Norman says, there are several organizations calling for spending boycott on February 28th. Will you support it, sir?
I think I've seen some online chatter about like a general strike or don't spend any money in the economy on that day. I don't know if that's going to change anything, if that's the way to make our voices heard. I don't want to discourage anything that would be effective. I think, protests, including, financial protests, can be quite strong and effective if they're unified, if they're targeted strategically. So you probably know more about that one than me. And if you think that that would be a way to express yourself effectively, go for it. I think we're all going to need to get creative here in the days ahead. And, I'm not beyond some constructive, peaceful civil disobedience. I did it on the House floor a few years ago when John Lewis led some of us in a sit-in to protest the gun violence epidemic in this country and the refusal of Republicans in Congress to do anything about gun safety. And I would consider doing that again. I think everyone should.
Thank you, Congressman. Your next question comes from Debbie. Debbie asks, can federal marshals arrest Musk for having illegal access to private data?
Yeah, thanks. I sometimes hear questions like, why can't that guy just be criminally charged or locked up or whatever? It's not that simple. First of all, you got to know that Democrats in Congress do not have any of those authorities. I can't control any of it. It is the Department of Justice, when you talk about federal law enforcement, where all of that takes place. And as we speak, Donald Trump is firing a lot of the people with integrity and ethics in the Department of Justice and replacing them with loyalists. So the idea that federal marshals would somehow swoop in and arrest Elon Musk is not something I would hold my breath about. I think it's highly unlikely. Now, what I will say is if courts begin to issue orders that order Elon Musk to stop doing something, and if they refuse to comply with those orders, then sometimes federal courts do have the ability to issue civil contempt penalties that can be enforced in different ways. They have a limited law enforcement authority that is their own, independent from the Department of Justice, and they can also assess fines and do things like freeze bank accounts and impound funds. So they're not powerless. They don't have all the enforcement tools of the executive branch, but they're not totally powerless. And I think that's why, even as defiant as this administration is, you haven't seen them yet openly defy a court order.
Thank you, Congressman. Next question comes from Raymond. Raymond says, why would Dems vote to raise the debt ceiling if Trump is going to use the money to build the wall?
Raymond, I don't think Democrats should provide our votes for Republicans unless we get really meaningful assurances across a range of things. The wall is like one of the things that is worrisome, but there's even bigger and more profoundly worrisome things than the wall, to me, at least. There's whether we can hang on to our democracy, whether we have a rule of law, whether Congress still has a role to play in this constitutional republic. And we're going to need to build in really binding assurances to any vote that I would be asked to cast, or else they're not going to get my vote.
Thank you, Congressman. Next question comes from Ellen of Eureka, and Ellen says, my main concern is the attack on healthcare, especially vaccinations and mental health. And I'd like to know how Democrats are addressing this.
Well, I wish I could tell you that the Democrats in the United States Senate were able to stop Robert Kennedy Jr. from being Secretary of Health and Human Services. Sadly, he was able to get confirmed. And so, that's one of the ways in which Congress, which our founders set up to be this vital check on abuse of power by a president. Congress is rolling over and turning into the president's lapdog right now under these Republicans in the House and Senate. The fact that RFK Jr. was confirmed for this key position of trust with over vaccine policy and so many other things where he's just unhinged. It's deeply alarming, and it says so much about how Congress no longer functions the way it was intended to do. All I can tell you for my part is that I will do everything I can to protect public health policies, mental health funding, science-based policy across the board. But we now have someone in government, more than one person in high levels of government, who reject science and prefer to find their information and their healthcare and other things from weird content providers on YouTube, and it's alarming and very dangerous.
Thank you, Congressman. We have time for one more question. Our last question comes from Amy, and Amy says, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid is a nonpartisan issue.
Yeah.
Congressman, are you speaking to GOP members, and are your constituents aware of how budget bill will affect them?
Yeah. The answer is certainly yes to the first part. Am I speaking to Republicans all the time? And I am somewhat encouraged. I'm starting to see, especially Republicans in tough districts where they know they're going to have to answer to voters and they need some Democrats and independents in order to keep their job. Those Republicans know they cannot support cuts to these programs. They're just too critical to the people they serve. And so, I think that will be the way we hold the line. In terms of whether, I think the broader public is sort of awakened to this. No, I don't think so yet. I think when they hear Donald Trump say, I will love and cherish Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security, many of them believe him. I don't understand that because he lies continuously. And even vowing to love and cherish doesn't mean much to a guy like Donald Trump if you look at his life. So, look, I'm going to do everything I can to hold the line. I have Republican allies in, I think, both the House and Senate for Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. And hopefully together we'll be able to protect these critical programs. It means, though, that we're going to have to get some of them to stand up to Donald Trump on his tax cuts, because that's really where the rubber meets the road. You can't have $4.5 trillion in tax cuts without doing incredible damage to these programs. And so we're going to need for these Republicans to join with Democrats and push back. And that's going to be tough for them because tax cuts, that is the currency of Republican politics in many cases. But that's really where this battle is going to be won or lost. And I appreciate the question. Appreciate all of you being part of a great, fast-paced discussion this evening. And I will hand it back to the moderator to close.
Thank you so much, Congressman. Folks, we have come to the end of this telephone town hall, and I want to thank everyone for taking the time this evening to join us for this very important conversation with Congressman Jared Huffman. Your questions and your feedback are vital as we continue to work on behalf of California's 2nd Congressional District. Congressman, we've covered a lot of things this evening, but before we wrap up the call this evening, I would invite you to share your final thoughts about this interactive town hall, sir, please.
Yeah. Well, thanks, folks. Look, this will not be the last chance for us to be in dialogue about the fast-moving developments in our country, in our community, around the world. I want to be in touch. And so please, I know you've already been invited by the moderator and others to sign up for my newsletter, to follow me on social media, but that helps us keep in touch. We can do more of these telephone town halls. I also will be coming to every part of my district. So watch for me doing a live in-person event somewhere near you, hopefully as soon as possible. It's an incredible honor to represent you. It's a hell of a tough time for all of us right now, but I want you to know that I am engaged 24/7. We are doing great work on your behalf every single day here in Washington and around the district, and you have my commitment to give it everything we've got. I think we share the values for sure that we've been talking about here tonight, and together we'll find our way through these tough times. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Congressman. Ladies and gentlemen, if we weren't able to address your questions tonight, please leave us a voicemail after this event, or you can call our office at 202-225-5161. Again, that number is 202-225-5161. We are here to help and ensure that your voices are heard. Congressman Huffman will be hosting more in-person and virtual telephone town halls like this to keep you informed and engaged on the issues that matter most. Thank you once again. We appreciate you joining the call. Have a blessed evening. Good night, everyone.